curiosity of our audiences, and we would like to have some questions. Your questions are welcome.
This is a question for Dr. Bladder in a TV scan. Then how do you delineate the fold and how do you correlate it with the internal loss? Or do you?
But still we know there is some residual urine always left. So bladder doesn't empty completely. So we can make out that V shape. Actually, I wish this was asked earlier because I had that clip.
Actually, Dr. Priya, your slide.
The videos.
Yeah, if every slide had that specific, the distinct diagram, then probably,
Yeah.
But still,
so I had the video
very good.
emptying the bladder, a little bit of residual urine still remains.
Okay.
So that is enough to delineate the V.
Okay, and the machines can tell you a curved cervical length, like the trace method
Generally
is better?
Generally do. We do not follow the trace method though. We do want to measure it from point A to point B. In extreme curve, we should just keep in mind that even if we are measuring the measurement per se, even if it is short, a curved cervix is a good predictor. It is a relief because clinically a short cervix is going to be straight.
Yes.
So
but
if it
still,
is curved,
you follow the curve method, the trace method,
no,
or
no,
you
we
take
generally
point to
don't.
point?
But in such cases where we are seeing that the cervix is proper C shape, in that you can trace and see the actual exact measurement.
Okay.
There's one more measurement length point that we have. We have one more method of measuring as length point, where we can take the trace up to a point and then take it into another direction. So in such curved cases, that length point measurement helps us a lot. That is
To our chairperson, Dr. Anupa ma'am.
Take this opportunity with permission of Bela madam that there are online ultrasound training programs which are there from Foxy. I have taken one of such course and they are wonderful programs whether you don't do ultrasound, but this will be a sincere request, and they are not very expensive programs. That is one. You can do it from your own home too. I would like to request Dr. Archana Mishra to be the chairperson for this session. We all know her very well, but it gives me a proud privilege to introduce Archana Mishra to the forum. Innovate Tool, EMOC, Skill Lab, Guideline Formulation, and whenever we are in trouble, she is a helping hand to all of us from Government of MP. She is awarded for innovation at National Summit for Best Practices for consecutive 5 years. So I think she definitely deserves a big round of applause. She has represented country at as national consultant for GDM at Barcelona, Spain, geriatric care of women at Bangkok, midwifery consultant at Vancouver, perinatal death audit at Cambodia, and has contributed as state expert to make guidelines for maternal death surveillance and review. It's a pleasure for having you around, Archana, and may I request you to please introduce our speaker for session 2.
Thank you, Anjali Didi, for such kind words. It's my proud privilege to introduce Dr. Bela Bhatt. She is a renowned obstetrician and fetal medicine consultant at Rainbow Women's Hospital in Mumbai. She is also a chairman of the Imaging Science Committee from 2021 to 24. She is a certified sonologist for fetal abnormalities and nuptial scan, member of SMFM, Society of Maternal and Fetal Medicine, life member of Society of Fetal Medicine. She is scientific secretary, AFG Mumbai, fetal medicine consultant at Railway Hospital Mumbai. She is a great academician, managing council member. May I request the members to just keep quiet so that the others can listen. Those at the back, please. She is also a winner of CS Dawn First Prize in the Best Paper at AICOG Bhubaneswar. First prize from Foxy Has Talent National Competition 2018. National Convener for Foxy Superstar Competition. National Convener for Wellness of Women Project of Foxy. Co-committee member of Youth Mela Foxy. And she won PCPNDT case in Mumbai High Court by fighting it in person. So over to you, madam. And I would also like to highlight one thing with the launch of sickle cell anemia project by our Honorable Prime Minister. The lecture of both Madam Bhatt and Dr. Hitesh is very important, and hope all of us will be illuminated by this lecture. Thank you.
So, good morning everybody. May I have your attention please, everybody, because I'm here to meet you all and we'll all have some good academic discussion here today. So, as a chairperson Foxy Imaging Science Committee, I bring greetings from Foxy to you all. Let me tell you one thing, that today while traveling from airport to this destination, we were all floored by the beauty of Bhopal, by the beautiful lake, greenery, really. And I know that Bhopal is known as a city of lakes, but looking at the audience, I feel it's a city of female gynecologists. I don't see a single male gynaec here. So, my better half is there, but he's not from Bhopal. Yes, and I like that. So very happy to see all female gynecologists, beautiful and brainy gynecologists sitting here. At the outset, I would like to thank Bhopalology Society President Dr. Anjali Ma'am, Secretary Dr. Madita, and of course my co-convener and member of Imaging Science Committee, Dr. Smita Dengle, because of whom we are all here today for this wonderful CME on this Sunday morning. So thank you, Smita, for putting all the efforts. Of course, thanks to Lilac Insights for putting all the efforts so that we could manage to, meet here today for this CME. And thanks to our guest of honor, Dr. Supriya Madam, for coming here and gracing this CME. So thank you so much, Madam. So topic first of all, I must congratulate both the first speakers, Dr. Smita and Dr. Priya, for wonderful insights on very simple and very important topics of amniotic fluid and cervix. So, gene tricks for obstetrician. Basically, this name we have made a little catchy. It is basically to understand the basics of genetics that each and every obstetrician must know. Whether you are doing fetal medicine, you're not doing ultrasound, doing ultrasound, we all must know about some of the basic aspects. We know that the fetus as a patient has its own place now, and therefore we need to understand the problems related to fetus, and we are all here to help the fetus and the mother. Well, it's all in the genes. That's what is said. Whether it's the beauty of Deepika Padukone or it's the dressing sense of Ranveer Singh, right? Well, that was just the lighter aspect. We must know about the basics of genetics, and that is when there is a cell with a complete chromosome set of 46XX or 46XY, it is called a euploid cell. This is absolute basics of any genetics if you want to understand. Now, in genetic disorders, obviously there will be change in chromosomes or genes. Well, I wish it was just a straight line like this, which is shown below, from suspecting a genetic disorder to reaching to a diagnosis. But unfortunately, it is not so. It is very complicated, as it is seen above, and therefore we all are entangled somewhere in between from suspicion to diagnosis. So, which are the common genetic problems? I'll first touch upon the common genetic problems, and towards the second half of my talk, in which I'm going to discuss about the cases, I'll take some rare scenarios also. So aneuploidy we know is the commonest, which is abnormal number of chromosomes in a cell. So addition of a chromosome is trisomy and deletion is monosomy. Now which are the common trisomies? Trisomy 21, 18, 13. We know trisomy 21 is Down syndrome. As you can see here in the chromosome number 21, there is an extra chromosome which is trisomy 21. Monosomy, where there is deletion of a chromosome. Turner syndrome is the commonest, and you can see here one chromosome is missing in the sex chromosome, and therefore it is XO, that is monosomy. Triploidy is different in the way that entire set of additional chromosome is there from either of the parents. So you will find one additional chromosome in each pair, that's triploidy. Which are the common single gene disorders? Well, obviously they are caused by genetic mutations. They are inherited in either autosomal recessive or dominant manner or X-linked. Autosomal recessive, where both the parents carry mutated gene. Autosomal dominant, where even if one parent carries, then it is going to transmit. And the examples, most common again, beta thalassemia, madam mentioned about sickle cell disease, cystic fibrosis, inborn errors of metabolism, spinal muscular atrophy. These are just one of very few genetic single gene disorders. There are hundreds of genetic disorders, and these days how the genetics is evolving, how the fetal medicine is evolving, we are coming to know newer and newer syndromes. Dr. Smita just talked about AAA syndrome. So every day in our practice we are trying to, kind of reach. So actually our vision is advancing. Everything is already there. We are just trying to detect these syndromes better these days. So which are the various tests available for any genetic disorder? We have screening tests and we have diagnostic tests. So what is a screening test? It is in conjunction with age-related risk of the patient. It is useful to segregate from high-risk patients from or high-risk population from low-risk population. Remember, screening tests are not diagnostic. They'll just tell us about the possibility of a disorder, but will not tell us in black and white whether this condition is there or not. So which are the screening tests available? Combined tests, we all know. I am sure in Bhopal also everybody must be doing this combined test at 11 to 13 weeks, 6 days, that is nuchal scan plus double marker. Second trimester we have cord marker, integrated test, genetic sonogram. I am not going to go much into details of screening tests because the topic is different. Nuchal scan, we know the significance of good CRL, good images, anti-NB, we have another soft markers, ductus venosus flow and tricuspid flow. One thing I would like to stress upon in this slide is, when we compare the sensitivity of all the screening tests, we know the best is the combined test. Alone double marker, 60% sensitivity. Alone nuchal scan, 80% sensitivity. When you combine both, the magic is the sensitivity improves to 90%. It is early in the pregnancy, and therefore we rely mainly on combined risk at 11 to 13 weeks, 6 days, right? Triple marker is obsolete. If at all patient doesn't come up in the first trimester, second trimester quad test is what is to be offered with 81% sensitivity. Okay, so once we do the screening test, we segregate from high risk and low risk population. This high risk population is then offered diagnostic tests like CVS or amniocentesis, and then we try to reach to the diagnosis. So which are the diagnostic tests available? Once you have done your CVS and amniocentesis, which test can you offer to the patients? The list of tests is FISH or QFPCR, karyotype, microarray, exome sequencing, whole exome sequencing, clinical exome sequencing, Sanger sequencing. Don't get confused, we'll get some clarity on this. Now, what are we doing by going from karyotype to microarray to exome sequencing? Basically, we are trying to zoom in onto a chromosome. So, with karyotype, this is the picture that we get. When we further zoom in with microarray, we can see some micro deletions and duplications on the chromosomes, which is copy number variants. We further zoom in, and we can, with the whole exome sequencing, we can pick up some of the point mutations also, right? So this is how we zoom in on the chromosome, And this is how the genetics is evolving. I am sure Shivanjali is going to throw more light on this. So in microarray, basically, if you can see, either a small part of this chromosome is missing, which is known as microdeletion, or it is duplicated, which is known as microduplication. It is the deletion which is more hazardous and leads to more pathology rather than duplication, but still there are some genetic syndromes in which there can be duplications. So the basic principles: when to order a diagnostic genetic test, which test to order, how to counsel the patient pre-test and post-test, and how to interpret the result. So when to order a genetic diagnostic test. So suppose you have done, as I said, the sensitive first trimester screening test is a combined test. You have done it and there is high risk on it. Or there is a previous child with some Robertsonian translocation. These are already there with the patient. One of the parents having some balanced translocation. Now, you have done your combined test, it is showing high risk. Now, first question that comes to your mind is, now which test should I offer to this patient? Once you do CVS at 11 to 13 weeks, 6 days, which test to be offered? So after positive, again there is step by step as we go in this investigation. First we have quick aneuploidy test like FISH or QFPCR, right, which tells us about the common trisomy 21, 18, 13 and sex chromosomes, whether they are there or not. If it is showing abnormality in either of these, 5 of these, then we go for karyotype to know the type of aneuploidy, which type of trisomy 21, 18, 13, which again I'll just discuss when I discuss about my first case. If you do not find any abnormality in FISH or QFPCR, the advantage of FISH QFPCR is you get result within 24 to 48 hours. So the patient's anxiety we can allay by telling that there is no abnormality common which is suspected 21, 18, 13. But if there is no abnormality, what is the next test that you are supposed to offer? These days we have microarray. As I said, we can zoom in further. We can get better details on microdeletion duplications. And what if that also doesn't pick up anything? There's no abnormality. We have to zoom in further, right? Then comes our exome sequencing, in which there are different types of exome sequencing. But step by step, this is how we can make best use of this test to try and reach to a diagnosis. That was about common chromosomal problems. Now, single gene disorders, as I have discussed, the common autosomal thalassemia minor, sickle cell anemia, cystic fibrosis, spinal muscular atrophy, mother being carrier of X-linked disease like hemophilia or Duchenne's muscular atrophy, or inborn error of metabolism like congenital adrenal hyperplasia or galactosemia. Now, again, this is very, very important for every obstetrician to understand. Suppose a patient, a couple with beta thalassemia minor comes to you. How do you go about it? You should have a complete clarity how to investigate, because many a times patients are referred directly for CVS, saying that these parents are having beta thalassemia. Now do CVS and find out whether the fetus is having thalassemia major or not, because this is an autosomal recessive disorder. So there are 25% chances that if both the parents are carrier, the fetus can be thalassemia major, which is what we are worried about. But that is not how we are supposed to work out, right? So what are we supposed to do? First of all, from HB electrophoresis, we come to know that both the parents are having thalassemia minor. So ideally, this patient we should receive pre-pregnancy. Step 2 is to find out from the parents. See, there are two different things. A lab diagnosis is different and a genetic diagnosis is a different thing. We need to find out the genetic mutation. Just because the diagnosis of beta thalassemia minor is there, the story doesn't end there. You need to do genetic test on the parents to try and find out what type of genetic mutation is there. And then next step is to go and check for the same genetic mutation on the material that you got on CVS or amniocentesis, and then either you can confirm or rule out thalassemia major in the fetus. Directly if the patient couple comes at 3 months, we cannot do anything on the sample, because what to test for on that sample? We have to have the genetic diagnosis in our hand before we do any diagnostic procedure. Now, pre and post test counseling is extremely important in all these genetic tests, because we know that these tests are not cheap. These are very expensive tests, microarray, exome sequencing, and when the patient is spending 15,000, 20,000, 25,000, 30,000, as we zoom in further, patients have that thing in mind, acha, 25,000 ka test kiya hai, so now I'll 100% get the diagnosis. No. We know these are the practical problems, but that is not that is not the reality, right? Even after doing a 25,000 and 30,000 tests also, we may not have the diagnosis in hand at the end. So pre-test counseling with geneticists is extremely important. Geneticists will take 1 or 2 hours to counsel the couple that these are the possibilities and this is how we reach to the diagnosis. We may or may not get the answer for that problem. So as I said, I'm going to discuss few cases here. Now this was a case at 12 weeks pregnancy. There was a high nuchal translucency with generalized edema. In the next this videos, you can see how clearly it is seen that generalized edema and nuchal translucency is increased. And genetic testing was done, which showed trisomy 21. It was terminated. Does the story end here? No. For this pregnancy, fine, we've got the answer. But next question of the patient would be, what is the chance of recurrence of trisomy 21? Okay. So for that, first we need to understand that there can be 3 types of trisomy 21. One is free trisomy 21, which is non-disjunction, which is 95% of trisomy 21 is going to be free trisomy, right? In which the recurrence rate is just 1% above the age risk. Second type, which is a translocation type of trisomy, which constitutes 4% of all trisomy 21, out of which again 3% is de novo, only 1% is familiar. So if you take 100%, out of that only 1% is one, which is going to be familiar, translocation type, which is going to can recur in the next pregnancy with higher recurrence rate. So if the mother is carrier, in case of 21-14 translocation, again it depends on from which chromosome to which chromosome there is translocation. These all details we get from karyotype. So if there is 21-14 translocation and mother is carrier, the chance of recurrence is very high, 12%. If father is carrier, it is going to be 3%, right? But these are the patients who definitely need CVS or amnio in next pregnancy because the chance of recurrence is very high. If there is 21-21 translocation, there is 100% recurrence of trisomy 21 in next pregnancy. So if the mother or the father is carrier, depending upon who is the carrier, you need to do gamete donor, you need to take either the sperm or the ovum, depending upon who is the carrier, because there will be 100% recurrence. Though these are very rare things, you must know about it. Third type is mosaic type, which is just 1%, and there is trisomy 21 is a post-zygotic event, and so the recurrence rate is same as the age risk. So, though the patient is very anxious, actual recurrence rate after trisomy 21 is not very high, but you need to try and understand what type of trisomy it was in the first time, and therefore we need to go to a geneticist and try and find out what was the reason for it. So these were follow-up cases of patients who had first baby as trisomy 21, they terminated, and then in next pregnancy they came to me. So in first case, it was a free trisomy. So we know that recurrence rate is not high, just 1% above the age risk. But we know the patient, if we are there in the place of patient, if patient is very anxious, I had first trisomy 21, I want to be 100% sure this time, I do not want. So we have to respect patient's wish. So in this case, patient was so anxious that after counseling also, they wanted to get karyotype of parents done. They did it, which was normal. Second pregnancy after nuchal scan, which was low risk. They wanted a diagnostic test, and we know if they ask for diagnostic test, we have to go for CVS or amnio. CVS was done, which showed a normal karyotype, and then she progressed till term and delivered a normal baby. So we have to respect a patient's wish. Similar case, free trisomy first baby, but the parents were counseled and they were fine. They were told that the recurrent risk is not very high, and they wanted the best screening test. We know for trisomy 21, the most sensitive screening test is NIPS. So that was offered, which showed low risk. Patient was fine with the result, and they continued without further any diagnostic test and delivered normal baby at term. So two similar scenarios, but again, depending upon after counseling, it is patient's wish that we have to respect. So, stereotyping and microarray and exome sequencing. We have this very important tool of nuchal scan at 11 to 13 weeks, 6 days, where you could see both the syndromes, trisomy 21 and 13, could be picked up right at nuchal scan with the help of, obviously you have to do a genetic testing after that, but it can be suspected very well at nuchal scan, and therefore let your nuchal, whether you offer NIPS to the patient, whether you offer any screening test, nuchal scan has to be your primary screening test because you get lots of information just from your nuchal scan. Second important thing here is whether it's a lethal anomaly for which you terminate a pregnancy or non-lethal but on the wish of patient if you are terminating. The story doesn't end at terminating pregnancy. You must send the fetal tissue for genetic testing so that you come to know to the diagnosis of genetic, whether there was any genetic cause in that. If so, whether there is a chance of recurrence in next pregnancy, and in conjunction with a geneticist, with a genetic counselor, we can always counsel the patient about the prognosis in the next pregnancy. If the patient is not in a state of mind to get the genetic testing of the fetal tissue done, or for financial reason they are not ready, then you must offer DNA storage, which is very, very important tool. It just costs 2,000 rupees, and the genetic lab would store this DNA, fetal tissue, in the genetic lab, and maybe after 6 months or 1 year, when you counsel the patient and they are ready for genetic testing, you can do a genetic test on that tissue to reach to the diagnosis of the cause of that particular anomaly, and you can counsel the patient better for next pregnancy. So that is very important point. Third case, this primary gravidae came at 6 weeks pregnancy, non-consanguineous, where both parents were having thalassemia. The lab diagnosis was there in the hand, but as I said, only my biochemical diagnosis is not important, lab diagnosis is not enough. So we first tested both the parents for genetic testing to find out the mutation for this particular thalassemia minor, and then CVS was done at 12 weeks. And as you can see in this report, the parental mutations were there for this thing, but the thalassemia minor, but the fetus was normal for beta thalassemia, and therefore they continued with the pregnancy, and the baby delivered at term and was not having thalassemia major. This is a couple presented at 7 weeks pregnancy, consanguineous marriage, previous baby with biochemical diagnosis of galactosomia. Now this is inborn error of metabolism. Now in first child also they had a lot of difficulty because for 1 month the baby was in NICU, and the diagnosis could be made at the end of 1 month that baby is having this inborn error of metabolism. These are rare things, and baby had septicemia and so many complications. At the end of 1 month, baby was diagnosed to have galactosomia. Now again, though the baby had suffered so much and the diagnosis was put, the biochemical diagnosis was there, but no genetic testing was done on that particular baby. Luckily, the patient came to me at 7 weeks, and therefore we had little time, so we could do genetic test on the index child first to find out the mutation. So the bottom line is always try and find out the genetic mutation in any kind of genetic syndrome or condition, and then we tested parents whether the same genetic mutation is there in the parents, because it could be there de novo also. You have to first of all go and back and find out whether the parents are having that, and then only it is going to come. There is a possibility of transmitting that to the next fetus or next pregnancy. And then both the parents were carrier, and CVS was done at 12 weeks with the same defect. Again, you can see here, this was the index child in which the pointer is not working, but hope you can see that the pathogenic mutation was there for galactosemia, whereas in the fetus, it was found that it was heterozygous. So the genetic lab mentioned that baby can be at the most carrier, but will not be affected by galactosomia. They continued with the pregnancy and delivered with me at term, and the baby was not having, baby is actually 1.5 years old now, and is normal, is not suffering from galactosomia. Now this is another interesting case where a couple came for preconception counseling for removal of copper T. Now the husband was normal, but the wife was having characteristic facial features. She was having brown colored iris, white forelock, and unusually wide nasal bridge with normal hearing. Now, the elder son, who was 12 years old, had hearing loss, both grey iris, white forelock, and but has a normal IQ, goes to school. The daughter, who's 8 years old, has hearing loss, one grey and one brown iris, white forelock, and unusually wide nasal bridge with normal IQ. So with all these features, obviously the geneticist comes into the picture, and communication with geneticist and after counseling, it was suspected that mother has Waardenburg syndrome. Shivanjali knows about this case. So the step one was, first we tested the more affected daughter who had severe hearing loss, and the blood was sent for genetic gene panel for Waardenburg syndrome, and report came in 6 weeks which showed pathological variant for Waardenburg syndrome, which was detected here, which you can see at the bottom on the right side. Pathogenic variant was found for Waardenburg syndrome, and so we confirmed that the baby has Waardenburg syndrome. Step 2 was, as I said, we have to go back and check whether the parent is having. We know Waardenburg syndrome is a autosomal dominant disorder, so a mother who is having all the phenotype has to have this genetic mutation. So mother's blood was tested for the same genetic mutation, same variant, and mother was found to have the same genetic mutation as the daughter. So it was confirmed that this is Waardenburg, which the mother has, it has gone to the daughter. Now the post-test counseling was done that this is an autosomal dominant disorder. So there are 50% chance in every pregnancy for the child to have the same Waardenburg syndrome. Obviously they were worried because both the babies, son and daughter, had hearing loss. So they did not want the same kind of problem in the next child, right? So there are two options now. Either in next pregnancy at 12 weeks we do CVS to find out the same genetic mutation in the fetus, or we go for donor ovum with IVF. They opted for the first option. Copper T was now removed. Patient conceived then, and then at 12 weeks after nuchal scan, CVS was done to check for the same genetic mutation. Again, it was good for them. They were fortunate that this baby, this fetus sample did not show the presence of the same affected, same genetic mutation for Waardenburg syndrome, and so the patient has now reached to almost 20 weeks pregnancy, and their baby is doing well. Now, learning point from this point is, again, what I want to highlight here is all these genetic tests takes long time, right? The first mutation, it took almost 6 weeks. Then again to test on the mother took 4 weeks. So we took 10 weeks just to confirm that both mother and baby are having genetic mutation. So if in the pregnancy at 12 weeks patient comes, we are not in the condition to do anything because we lose 10 weeks till we diagnose the genetic mutation. Ideally, it has to be done pre-conception. I was lucky here because the patient had come for copper T removal, which I didn't remove. First tested both the daughter and the mother, confirmed the diagnosis, then the patient conceived. So when patient conceived, I had the diagnosis, genetic diagnosis in hand. So I knew what specifically to order to genetic test at 12 weeks when I do the CVS. So this is what is very important, that whenever you are suspecting something in a patient, and if the patient comes in pre-conception time, take this golden opportunity and work up on the mother and the index child. Now, this was about all rosy pictures where we had, diagnosis, genetic diagnosis in our hand. As I said, not always we get genetic diagnosis in geneticists, and many a times after doing everything also, we do not get answer. Again, this patient, 33 years old, third gravida, non-consanguineous marriage, came at 11 weeks pregnancy. Fourth gravida, 2 para, 1 abortion, 2 sons, 9 and 7 years age, both having muscular disorder. No genetic test of any child done so far, directly coming at 11 weeks. Now, 9 years, a son had muscular disorder with hypertonus, speech difficulties, slurred speech, nystagmus, normal IQ, going to school but not able to walk because of spasticity. Baby has to be carried at the age of 9 years also. 7 years, same problem, muscular disorder, hypertonus with speech difficulty, though milder than elder brother, nystagmus, normal IQ, going to school. But both the children could not walk on their own, right? So, the parents were obviously very anxious because they wanted to see that the next pregnancy, the next child is not affected with the same. Now, obviously, when we look at such condition, we go to the pedigree charting, try and find out whether anybody in the family is suffering from the same. We did not get proper data, but mother has 4 sisters, all normal, 3 brothers, 2 normal, but one had query, some muscular dystrophy, who died at the age of 30 years. Obviously, most of the cases, we do not get any reports, so no papers were available, what is there. This was a suspicion. Genetic counseling was done, and it was strongly suspected Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, which has X-linked recessive disorder, because both the male were sufferer. So the step 1 was to test for more affected elder son for DMD gene defect. So first, our geneticist Shivanjali suggested that MLPA should be done, multiplex ligation dependent probe amplification, which detects small rearrangements, and it's a low cost. We first look at the cost, right? But then we did that, we didn't get any answer. It didn't show any mutation. So then we went to broader test, genetic test, muscular dystrophy and congenital myopathy panel. Again, at the end of it, no answer, because it did not show any mutation. So my condition was like that picture GIF that I showed. After doing everything also, I'm not getting any answer. So genetic counseling was again done, reverse phenotyping was done, opinion was given for whole exome sequencing, further zooming in on the chromosome. But the patient was drained out, they refused for that. By then, patient had reached the 23-24 weeks of pregnancy, and they left everything on fate. They refused further testing, and it is ongoing pregnancy. So from this, we can see that how much ever zooming in we do karyotype, we do microarray, we do whole exome sequencing, still there are some missing links. We do not know about lots of genetics. We still do not know. And when we look at the story of exome and genome, we can see here that when we combine all the exons, they make 1% of exome, which is like a slice of an orange. Rest 99% is genome, which we have not even touched till today. And out of this 1% genome also, we hardly know about any genetics. So there's the reason genetics is absolutely evolving branch, and maybe after 1 year you meet here, you'll have some better insights on this. Right now we know very little about it, but we need to keep working on it to get answers to this. Then another problem with genetics is normal variants of unknown significance, for which there is no pathological finding. Maybe some of them may turn out to be pathological in the future, we do not know, but when it comes like this in the report, it's very difficult to counsel the patient, because there is some mutation which is seen, but it is not of significance, clinical significance. So patient will not be able to understand, and that's a challenge for counseling. So we refer to geneticist Shivanjali for counseling. So DNA is a mystery yet to be solved, as if DNA is telling you have not analyzed me fully, and maybe in future we'll get some advancement, we'll be able to remove the pathological gene in a patient having genetic problem, put in a healthy gene, and we'll be able to treat some of the genetic disorders to see a healthy person like this. And as a chairperson for Foxy Imaging Science Committee, it is my dream to see that every obstetrician and gynecologist becomes a sono obstetrician and gynecologist, because we know that these days each and every patient that walks in your OPD, whether it's obs or gynae, you need to have ultrasound for the patient. So why not learn ourselves? If I can learn, I think every obstetrician can learn it, and we can further refine our skills for ultrasound. And so this is my dream, and I'll keep working for it throughout my tenure of 3 years in Imaging Science Committee, Foxy. Thanks for patient hearing.
Said I am thankful to Bhopal OBGYN Society, and in every conference, either it is like Hindi movies, the law and police comes last. But I advise you to keep law first in your practice if you want to have safe practice. So friends, our practice is like this. We usually, see, this is a doctor, and we are crossing roads like this from morning to evening daily, right? This is how we practice. We are having so many difficult cases, and we are crossing like this. Right? So, medical legal aspects of fetal medicine. Now let me tell you that there is nothing like medico-legal aspect of fetal medicine. There is nothing like medico-legal aspect as such, because we have habit of creating words or degrees or qualifications or some nomenclatures. It is a legal field or legal aspects applicable to a doctor, right? But we are in habit of laparoscopist, sonologist. There are no such degrees by MCI. Proctologist, right? We are putting such words. We have not heard any time politico-legal aspect, journalisto-legal aspect, engineero-legal aspect, but we have created medico-legal. There is no such word. It is legal, the legal laws or legal implications to a doctor. That's it. And law is not divided the way the medical science is divided. There are no different laws for pediatrician or fetal medicine or gynecologist or surgeons or orthopedics. Law has its own division. Civil laws, criminal laws, family laws. There are different laws, right? Constitution of India. It is not divided as per medicine. But I am always usually in various conferences I am asked to talk about medico-legal aspect of first trimester, medico-legal aspects of second trimester. It is like fetal medicine in Hindus, fetal medicine in Muslims, fetal medicine in Parsis. It is not divided like that. But still, I always say yes for the topic, so that they don't cancel me. And in our practice, usually that also happens. See, whatever careful you are, whatever test you do, right, and you are very careful, you have done everything possible, but still, when you go further ahead, this can happen. Right? So, what is medical negligence? Usually, the doctors have questioned, am I wrong? If I have done something wrong. What is medical negligence? If you see the definition of medical negligence, it says to do something which a prudent man, we are talking about medical negligence. So, we will use the word, instead of man, we will use the word doctor. So, to do something which a prudent doctor in similar situation will not do, that is act of commission. I'll give you an example. If suppose patient is having A positive blood group and you transfuse her with B positive, you have done something which a prudent doctor in similar situation will not do. You are negligent for act of commission. Or not to do something which a prudent doctor in similar situation will do, that is act of omission. I'll give you another example. Say a patient is inside the operation theatre and you are seeing on a monitor that her oxygen level is going down from 100 to 80 to 70 to 60 to 50. You cannot let her die. Right? You have to do something. You cannot say nature has killed her. I was just watching. You can't do that. That is act of omission, because a prudent doctor would have given oxygen, would have called anesthetist, would have intubated the patient. If you fail to do that, you are negligent for the act of omission. So that is how negligence is decided. Now, what that prudent doctor would have done? Who is prudent? Now, there is nothing like a prudent doctor. It is just like a common man of R.K. Lakshman. You can see two common men in this picture, right? So what is common? How the court will come to know that what prudent doctor would have done? How can I convince the judge that what prudent doctor would have done? There are various ways to do it. And that is called Bohlam's test, right? And the law doesn't expect very higher skill. It is sufficient if you exercise ordinary skill of ordinary competent person practicing that particular art. So after listening to all this, if ordinary gynecologist, if he feels that I have not advised this test which some fetal medicine consultant would have advised, you are justified if you have not done that test, right? But, and how the court will see it, if something is given in the textbook and you have done the same, then your practice will considered as a standard practice. Court will believe that prudent doctor would have done the same. Or if it is a practice in nearby medical college, or if some practice is accepted by the peers, somebody will give certificate that, or affidavit in the court that I also would have done the same, then, or something has appeared in an index journal. If you can show either of these to the court, that my doctor has done the same thing, which is mentioned either in the textbook or journal, or somebody would have done the same, or medical college has done the same, then your practice is a standard practice and you are not negligent. So that is how the court decides about negligence. Now when we come to negligence, it further, the expectation of standard of care are different from a GP and a consultant. So more qualifications you have, the expectation of standard of care increases. And second thing, the place of treatment given also will be taken into consideration. So if treatment is given by MD Gynec at PHC level and some MD Gynec sitting at Ambani Hospital, Mumbai, you cannot compare the standards or standard of care, right? The treatment or the investigations or tests offered at village are different, even though they both are MD Gynec, right? So the place of treatment given also matters while deciding the case, and that is what is the role of the your advocate to present before the judge that from which area or in which area you are practicing. Now there are common causes of medico-legal problem. What are the common causes? Improper communication, by colleagues, rough behavior, unexpected results and non-compliance of the laws. Let us see one by one. Consent not proper, information about the charges, these are the two important aspects. And consent is something which was discussed, it is altogether a different talk, but in case of Samira Kohli versus Dr. Prabha Manchanda, everybody should read this judgment by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said that what the consent is in the Indian context. And they said consent has to have all these things. Nature of the procedure, nature and procedure of the treatment, purpose of the treatment, benefit of the treatment, alternate of the treatment, outline of the risk, and adverse consequence. And each procedure, each operation has different nature, different purpose, different benefit, different alternates. So you have to have procedure specific consent. That is what the Supreme Court said. So you must have consent for CVS, you must have consent for amniocentesis, you must have consent for cesarean, you must have consent for DNC, and all these consents are different. Just a single page, you write name of the operation as CVS and it becomes consent of CVS. You write cesarean, it becomes consent of cesarean. That consents are blanket consents are not allowed after 2008. You must have procedure specific consent. That is, you have to keep in mind. Now, you can avoid litigation by three things that we discussed in our previous talks also. By communication, communication and communication. And it is said that more you talk with your patient in your consulting room, less you will have to talk against her in the courtroom. Right? So, you have to talk more. And counseling is definitely a skill. And there is a talk, counseling skills. But I will give you an example. If you give examples to the patient, they will believe or they will understand certain things. Like the example which Bela gave in the previous talk, that the tests are costly, but still you don't get result. How to convince patient on that? So, if I am there in that place, I usually say that see, Amir Khan spent almost 30-40 crore rupees per marriage and he divorced 3 times. मेरी कुछ लाख में हो गई पर अब तक चल रही है. So it is not the money which will give you result. Right? So you have to give examples and they will get convinced. Right? Always give befitting example and that will help you. So let me tell you once again, the importance of talking in your consulting room has same benefit of remaining quiet at home. And what are the benefits? It will make other person feel empowered, avoid misunderstandings and avoid litigation and legal hurdles. So talk more at your consulting room and talk less at home, especially for men. Unfortunately, we are in on the lesser side. Now, good communication is not just necessary to prevent yourself from medico-legal problem. Good communication is a reflection of good human nature. Usually, we judge person from how he talks, right? If somebody talks nicely, we believe that that person is good. So, we have to have a good communication skill. By colleague or rough behavior of the staff. I have seen in my practice almost 40 to 50% of the cases. And I'm not taking any cases from the patient side against the doctor. But I'm getting at least 10 to 20 phone calls in a month asking that we want to teach lesson to that hospital or to that doctor. And their main grievance is about the improper communication. Right? So if you improve on this, then almost 40 to 50% of the litigations will stop. And by colleague, how by colleague? Somebody can harm you without their knowledge, right? I will give you an example. And there is a case of Dr. Anil. Dr. Anil, he's a gynecologist and he was sitting in his consulting room. One patient came, she was 6 months amenorrhea, 6 weeks amenorrhea. So in the first trimester she came, he examined, he said, you are pregnant. She said, how can I be pregnant? I've already got family planning operation done some 5-6 years back. So the doctor said, but you are pregnant, it fails. So if you want to go ahead with the termination, I can do it. She said, doctor, is it a mistake of the previous doctor? He said, no, no, this can happen. There is a natural healing process. It can happen, it fails in certain percentage. He examined the patient. He said, I will give you concession, don't worry, but you will get rid and we will do operation again. While going back against that patient says, doctor, can you give it in writing something against the previous doctor so that we can file case? He said, I cannot give because this can happen. It is mentioned in the book. And he was curious. He asked the patient, where did you get this operation done? She said, sir, you only did it 6 years back. So you understand, patients are very smart. A single word you will utter and it will go against you. And this is a real story. This is not a, this is a real fact, right? Dr. Anil is still there and he said this, he wrote this in one of the groups. So please be very careful while giving, even if you make gestures, acha ye nahi karwaya, they will fix that thing and file case against that doctor. And next time it can be you. So always be very careful, never give any opinion. And since I have become advocate now, I have seen in our practice, no lawyer will give opinion about the previous advocate. And to me also they are bringing case. Even doctors they are bringing, what my advocate has not done. I said, that is not my job. What I have to do, I will do it. Right? So you also or we also should not give any opinion against our colleague. Right? That we have to be very careful about. Our staff, we have to teach our staff, just like hotel staff, right? You see, you go to any hotel. Now, if you go to the very smallest of the hotel, you see how courteous the staff is. If you will say this soup is not good, okay, I will change it, right? So you train them, you train the staff how to behave with it, because patients spend almost 5 to 10 minutes with the doctor, consultant, but they are sitting outside for 1 hour, right? And they are, even after operation also you take rounds 1 or twice in a day. But most of the time, for the entire duration of their stay in the hospital, they are most of the time they are taken care by the staff or not taken care by the staff. So please be train your staff to give good services. Unexpected results. Obviously, whenever the results are unexpected, you can expect the case against you. Like you are missing anomalies or IUFD or something, and this type of news you will find, right? Test okay, but baby born with 1 arm, 1 kidney. Missed anomalies that would be difficult to justify in the court. This list was presented in one of the cases that these are the anomalies one should not ideally miss, right? And non-compliance of the laws. If you do not comply the law, and we have seen it in PCP and DT, registration is not there, proper documentation is not there, compliance for notice board, BEREC, nameplate, if all these things are not there, then they will seal the machine or they will take some action. And we usually say that, itne mein kyun kar diya? But we don't know the law. In PCP and DT Act, it is mentioned that in section 23/1, that is the section for the punishment, it is mentioned that if somebody, any person who do not follow any provisions of the act or these rules is liable to be punished for 3 years of imprisonment, up to 3 years of imprisonment, for anything. So whatever is written in the law, if you do not follow, punishment is 3 years. And Foxy challenged that in the court to remove that any word, but Supreme Court said no, we want to keep that word as it is. So if you do not put a full stop in the Form F, the punishment is 3 years. If you do not have a nameplate, because Rule 18/8 says a nameplate should be there. If you do not have nameplate, punishment is 3 years. If you do not have a board, punishment is 3 years. For everything and anything, punishment is 3 years of imprisonment. That is written in the law, right? So whatever it is law of the land, and we have to follow. And of course, do not do sex determination, right? For whatever pressure you get, do not do sex determination, because that is the purpose, or for that purpose only the law is made. So never do any sex determination for anybody. And how to save yourself from medico-legal problem. There are certain do's and don'ts. So you have to prevent complications. This is the list, and we will see first, prevention of complication. How can you prevent complication? By following the standard protocol, by remaining in touch with the standard practice, by continuous training of the staff and yourself, by such CM is by involving colleague in the case of doubt, by referring in time, by taking patient suspicion and feeling. If patient says, sir, एक second opinion ले लूँ, ये doctor से. I have seen many doctors they are telling, वो मेरा junior है, उससे क्या पूछेगी? मैंने ही सिखाया है उसको. Don't tell that. Let them go. Right? In look-alike condition, don't hesitate to take second opinion. Right? Always take second opinion if you have certain conditions which you feel that it can be this or that. Take second opinion. Help of preventive medico-legal service that we are running, so I am not telling that, but we are having a preventive medico-legal service. You can take help of that. Communication, as I told you, and never give guarantee about the results, because we are in a branch where beauty can convert into beast and beast can convert into beauty. If you will say that this patient will not survive and she may attend your funeral, right? So never give any result, assurance about the result. What you have to tell? You have to tell that I guarantee nothing, but my honest effort and care for you. I am not God, but a well-trained professional wanting to take care of the patient. Documents. It is again a separate lecture, but how to prepare, what all to prepare, how and when to give it to the patient, how to give, what to write. That all is, you have to understand it by the standards of medical practice. No legal book mentions anything about medical documentation. See, I am getting many questions about that also. Sir, इसको ये कर सकता हूँ, इसको cesarean कर सकता हूँ, इसको discharge दे सकता हूँ. Legal book will not write all these things. It hardly tells anything about law. How can it tell anything about medicine? Medicine you have to learn from our medical books. Do not try to learn medicine from the legal books. Documentation is must. We have to document everything. Even counseling you do, you have to document. You have to take signature. And these are various documents which we have to keep even under Clinical Establishment Act. There is a list given. You have to have all these documents. Never alter the records, because the judges and the opposite lawyer, they may not know the medicine, but they are fathers and grandfathers of documents. They can immediately pick up that this was done afterwards, or this is altered, or this is forged. I have seen many cases where the doctors are taking signature on a blank form or blank paper. When something goes wrong, they will start writing, and they will go beyond the signature time, and they will put the exact curve as the patient has signed. Now, how can you know that the patient is going to sign in this manner and you leave the exact curve in writing? Immediately the judge will come to know this is forgery. And the punishment for forgery is 3 to 10 years of imprisonment. So why to take that risk? Right? So do not alter any record. Time, date, signature, that all they will come to know. If you write something in between the lines, now who will write in a fresh page in between the lines? Nobody will. Right? So you have to have proper documents. They can immediately pick up all these things, which we feel that we have taken. And we are very poor at record keeping. When we were residents, we used to write operative notes. A patient was taken inside the operation theatre, painting, draping, done. The incision was kept 2 centimeters above the pubic symphysis. The abdomen was opened in layers. Right? And when we become senior, we write hysterectomy done. So please maintain your good habits, write proper documents. Good documentation is a good defense, poor documentation is a poor defense, and no documentation means no defense in the court. We are not skipping these cases. How the court sees the case or how the court decides the case, I don't want to go into these cases, but the message which I want to give is, yes, this one, always order investigation before 20 to 24 weeks for anomaly scan. Why 20 to 24? Because the law is amended now up to 24, but between 20 to 24 only lethal anomalies are included. The anomalies which are not compatible with life, only those are. So for polydactyly you cannot terminate